I want you to think about um, a smoke detector in your house.
Okay. Yeah.
Just sits up there on the ceiling, right? Completely silent.
Right.
Totally useless until the exact moment your kitchen is, like, already filled with smoke.
Right. The fire is already going.
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't put out the fire. It
Yeah.
doesn't teach you how to chop vegetables. And it definitely doesn't teach you how to, cook safely in the first place.
No, it just screams at you.
It just screams to alert you to a disaster that is literally already happening. And for decades, we've basically been treating the global employee engagement industry exactly like that smoke detector.
Yeah, that's a really good way to frame it.
Right. We wait for the alarm to go off rather than just, I don't know, designing a kitchen where things don't catch on fire.
Yeah.
So whether you're, prepping for a big strategic meeting, or maybe rethinking your own career trajectory, or just insanely curious about why your daily workflow feels like such an uphill battle, we've got something special for you today.
We really do.
On this deep dive, we are unpacking a massive shift in how organizations function. We're talking about a fundamental rethinking of the workplace, moving away from just, measuring retrospective misery and moving toward actively designing human-centered work.
And the structural failure of that smoke detector approach, it's just staggering when you actually look at the economics behind it.
Well, the numbers are wild.
Right. I mean, Gallup estimates that the global engagement industry is a $100 billion annual enterprise.
Wait, 100 billion? With a B.
With a B. Organizations are literally spending $100 billion a year just to take a picture of the past.
That is insane.
It is. And if you look at the visual backdrop behind me right now, you'll see a transition taking place. It's shifting from this incredibly sterile, gray, isolated cubicle farm into a vibrant, interconnected, dynamic cityscape.
I love that visual.
Yeah, and that visual evolution is really the core premise of Dr. Jonathan H. Westover's research, which is our main source today. He argues that we have to move from viewing people as isolated units of labor in a gray box to recognizing them as whole humans operating in a complex ecosystem.
So moving from this idea of employee engagement to people experience.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that organizations are entirely misaligned. They measure these retrospective snapshots instead of designing prospective environments.
Okay, let's unpack this because that $100 billion figure is just hard to wrap your head around.
It's massive.
We're spending the equivalent of the GDP of a small country every single year just to ask people to rate their workplace on a scale of 1 to 5.
Yep. Strongly agree to strongly disagree.
Right. And then the executives look at the dashboards, and HR runs these focus groups to interpret the low scores, and managers are pushed into emergency training sessions. But the actual fundamental reality of the workday doesn't change.
No, it rarely does. The high performers still leave. Remote workers still feel totally isolated.
Because the core issue seems to be that an engagement survey, it basically just identifies dissatisfaction after it's already crystallized.
Precisely. By the time that data is processed and, presented to a leadership team in a PowerPoint, the opportunity for a real meaningful intervention is just gone.
Right. The person who was frustrated back in March has already mentally checked out by the time you're reading the survey results in October.
Exactly. And the limitation isn't necessarily the statistical validity of the surveys themselves. The problem is the whole conceptual framing.
How so?
Well, we're basically applying a reactive measurement tool to a systemic design problem. We can actually borrow a foundational concept from Pine and Gilmore here.
Oh, the experience economy guys.
Yes, exactly. In the consumer market, it's universally accepted that a company doesn't just compete on the utilitarian function of a product anymore. They compete on the entire end-to-end experience.
Right, discovering it, buying it, using it, getting support.
Exactly. I mean, if you buy a smartphone and the unboxing process is a nightmare and the software is super clunky and customer service is just unreachable, you blame the company, right?
Totally. I don't blame myself for being a bad consumer.
Right. But internally, inside the walls of the organization, we have historically blamed the worker for not being engaged with the completely broken system.
Wow. We blame the user.
We blame the user. And we are just now waking up to the reality that organizational design requires the exact same experiential rigor that we apply to consumer products.
Well, wait, let me push back a little here.
Yeah.
Isn't people experience just like a trendy HR rebranding of employee experience? I mean, why does this terminology actually matter to the listener who is just logging into their computer at 9 a.m.?
That's a totally fair question. It can definitely sound like corporate rebranding, just a trendy new domain name and a different font on the handbook, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But there is a massive psychological difference between those two terms. When an organization uses the word employee, they're framing that individual purely through a contractual, transactional lens.
So we pay you capital, you give us labor.
Exactly. The relationship is entirely confined to a job description.
Hmm.
But the term people, that forces an acknowledgement of a much more complex reality.
Because you don't just stop being a person when you clock in.
Right. The person logging into that virtual meeting at 9 a.m. doesn't cease to be a parent or a caregiver or a community member. They might be managing a chronic health condition.
Right.
Recognizing those multiple identities is not just a moral stance, it's an operational imperative. And this is where Rothbard and Ramarajan's research is so crucial. They dive into this concept of identity fragmentation.
Identity fragmentation, what exactly is that?
Well, when a workplace culture demands that an individual suppress their non-work identities, like
Yeah.
when they feel forced to hide the anxiety of managing an aging parent's health care, or they have to conceal that they need to leave at 5 p.m. sharp for a civic commitment, they have to maintain this fragmented facade.
And that takes effort.
A massive amount of effort. The mechanism at play here is a severe cognitive and emotional tax. Suppressing a core part of your identity requires active, continuous psychological energy.
It makes me think of a computer running way too many heavy applications in the background.
Yes, that's a perfect analogy.
Like, even if you're just trying to type a simple document on the screen, the battery is just draining so fast because the processor's working overtime on tasks you can't even see.
Exactly.
If you have to spend 20% of your mental energy just pretending to be this idealized, unencumbered corporate robot, that is 20% less cognitive capacity you have for creative problem solving.
Or strategic thinking, or deep focus, you are exhausted before the actual work even begins.
Yeah, you're burnt out by 10 a.m.
Right. And when an organization designs a people experience that legitimately supports the whole person, they're actively closing those background applications. They're reducing that cognitive tax.
So that's the real difference between the two approaches.
Exactly. Engagement measures psychological attachment at highly specific, isolated intervals. It's checking your pulse once a year. But people experience measures continuous daily touch points.
Like the onboarding clarity or IT support.
Yes. It's the clarity of the instructions on day one. It's the responsiveness of the IT department when your system crashes. It's the tone of the email your manager sends after a mistake. It is the cumulative effect of every single interaction.
Okay, so acknowledging this whole person isn't just a warm, fuzzy HR concept.
Yeah.
It has to have massive financial implications, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the hard ROI.
Oh, it absolutely does. Supporting the whole person isn't just about empathy. It has quantifiable structural impacts on the bottom line.
I know the source cited some IBM data that was pretty wild.
Yeah, the IBM Smarter Workforce Institute data. They found that organizations scoring in the top quartile for experience design achieve 4.2 times higher average profit.
4.2 times.
Yeah. And 2.1 times higher average revenue growth compared to organizations in the bottom quartile.
That's not just a minor bump in efficiency. I mean, a profit multiple of 4 fundamentally alters a company's entire market position.
It changes everything.
But, correlation isn't always causation. What is the actual granular mechanism that is driving that massive profit differential? Like, where is the money actually being lost in the bad companies?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the primary mechanism eroding that profit is what researchers call workplace friction.
Friction, okay.
Yeah, friction is basically the unnecessary effort required to accomplish a task. It's the gap between what you need to do and the systemic barriers the organization places in your way.
Got it.
And research by Mark and colleagues quantifies this brilliantly. They found that for knowledge workers, workplace friction drains roughly 20 to 30% of daily productivity.
20 to 30%. That is a huge chunk of the day.
Right. And if you scale that across an enterprise, the financial bleeding is just catastrophic.
I mean, think about it. If a company has 10,000 employees and they're losing a quarter of their day to unnecessary effort, the company is basically paying 2,500 employees a full salary to do absolutely nothing.
Nothing but fight with internal bureaucracy and broken systems. Exactly.
It's like having a pebble in your shoe.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a big deal for the first block, right?
Ah.
You just adjust your stride slightly and keep going. But try running a marathon or, a fiscal year with it.
You'd be in agony.
Right. Your back aches, your pace drops by 30%. Suddenly you've lost all your speed. But how does 20 to 30% of our day just vanish into this unnecessary effort? What does that actually look like?
Well, it evaporates through compounding microbarriers. It's a procurement process that requires sequential approvals from 4 different stakeholders, and none of them have visibility into the other's workflows.
Ugh, I've been there.
Right. Or it's outdated enterprise software where an employee has to manually enter the exact same client data into 3 separate, totally disconnected databases.
Oh, the worst. Or when you have a matrixed organization and literally no one knows who has the final decision rights.
Exactly. Which results in those endless diplomatic email chains that consume hours and produce zero outcomes. But the real danger of this friction isn't just the immediate time lost, it's the organizational scar tissue it creates over time.
Scar tissue, I like that phrase. It implies that friction doesn't just reset at the end of the day, it builds up.
Exactly.
If a workforce spends 3 years fighting a terrible expense reporting system, their psychological posture toward the company fundamentally changes.
And this is exactly what Rafferty and Jamieson found in their research on change management. They showed that an employee's willingness to embrace any new organizational initiative is almost entirely dictated by their accumulated experiences with past changes.
So if the last 3 software rollouts were just like chaotic, poorly communicated disasters.
Right, that resulted in lost files and weekend work.
Mm.
The workforce develops a deep structural skepticism.
So the next time leadership announces an exciting new strategic pivot, everyone is just rolling their eyes.
Exactly. The default response isn't enthusiasm, it's active resistance or just quiet noncompliance. Past poor experiences create skepticism for future changes.
That makes total sense. So to see the inverse of that, what happens when you actively target and remove a source of friction? We can look at the Adobe case study, right?
Yes, Adobe's a perfect example. They realized that the traditional annual performance review was basically the ultimate organizational pebble in the shoe.
Oh, absolutely. Annual reviews are the worst.
They really are. For decades, companies have relied on these massive, backward-looking evaluations. They generate profound anxiety for the individual, they create weeks of administrative dread for the manager, and they rarely provide any actionable developmental value.
It's just an incredibly high-friction process that taxes everyone.
Right. And Adobe recognized that this annual review was actively harming the neuroplasticity required for learning and growth.
Wait, neuroplasticity?
Yeah, I mean, when an employee sits down for a review that dictates their compensation and basically judges their entire year, their brain enters a defensive state. And you cannot learn when you are defending yourself.
That is so true. Your fight or flight kicks in.
Exactly. So Adobe completely dismantled that architecture. They shifted from the annual review to continuous check-ins.
Like just regular conversations.
Yeah, frequent, forward-looking conversations that focus on strengths, immediate course correction, and future growth, rather than just pointing out deficits from 8 months ago.
The mechanics of that shift are actually brilliant.
Yeah.
By breaking one massive high-stakes confrontation into a dozen low-stakes conversations, they completely neutralize the anxiety spike.
Yes, it has a dual benefit. The emotional tax on the person plummets, but the performance feedback loop for the company actually gets tighter and more accurate.
It's a win-win. And when companies fail to make these kinds of systemic fixes, the cost of employee turnover is just staggering. I mean, the estimated replacement cost for knowledge workers, what, 50 to 200% of their annual compensation?
Depending on the scarcity of their skills, yes.
That's massive.
And that turnover cost is where the theoretical concepts of experience design hit the CFO's ledger. Salesforce provides one of the most compelling examples of this.
What did Salesforce do?
Well, they identified a significant retention problem occurring within an employee's first 12 months. And the traditional corporate response to early turnover is usually a blunt instrument, right? Like increase starting salaries or offer retention bonuses.
Throw money at it.
Right. But Salesforce took an experiential approach. They utilize journey mapping and iterative prototyping to completely redesign the new higher onboarding experience.
So they shifted the onboarding process from like a transactional checklist to an actual supportive journey. And didn't they improve their 12-month retention by something crazy?
18 percentage points.
Wow.
Yeah. And that single intervention saved them over $50 million annually in reduced recruiting, hiring, and training costs.
$50 million. Just by making sure a new employee doesn't feel like they're in a chaotic free fall on day one.
Exactly. But beyond the corporate ledger, we really have to acknowledge the human cost of bad design. When you force people to operate in a high-friction environment day after day, it literally makes them sick.
You mean clinical outcomes?
Yes. Maslack and Leiter's foundational research on burnout shows that sustained workplace frustration, ambiguity, and lack of autonomy contribute directly to clinical anxiety, depression, and physical health issues.
That's sobering. So a poorly designed workflow is actually a public health issue.
It really is. And ironically, the organization ends up absorbing those costs anyway through escalated healthcare premiums, short-term disability claims, and chronic absenteeism.
So designing a human-centered experience isn't just a nice HR thing. It's a financial necessity and an ethical obligation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if friction is the enemy and experience is the product we're building, how do organizations actually start designing a better day for you? I mean, you can't fix a workflow you don't understand, right?
No, you can't. And this is where we have to move away from those process flowcharts drawn by auditors in a boardroom and move toward actual journey mapping.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Tell me about journey mapping.
Journey mapping is the core methodology of experience design. It's the practice of visualizing the end-to-end trajectory of a specific workplace experience strictly from the perspective of the user.
So not how it's supposed to work.
Right. An auditor's flowchart shows how a process is supposed to work in a perfect world. A journey map captures how the process actually feels in reality.
It captures the emotional arcs, the confusion, all those shadow IT systems people invent just to bypass broken rules.
Exactly. And the techniques used to build these maps are fascinating because they require actual observation rather than just asking people to fill out a survey.
Like shadowing.
Yes, shadowing. Researchers physically or virtually observe an employee's workflow to see the silent workarounds they rely on. They also use experience diaries, where employees record their emotional state and friction points in real time over a week.
That sounds super intensive. What about critical incident interviews? I read about those in the source.
Yeah, those dive deep into the specific chain of events that led to a major failure or a major success. But honestly, the most intriguing technique is the sentiment analysis of digital interactions.
Okay, wait. How does an organization analyze sentiment without violating privacy? I mean, that sounds a little Big Brother.
That is the crucial distinction.
Okay.
It is about metadata and aggregate trends, not individual surveillance.
Yeah.
Using natural language processing, organizations analyze communication patterns across the enterprise, but not the private contents.
So they aren't reading my DMs to see if I'm complaining about my boss.
No. The system is looking at the metadata of a workflow. For example, if a specific procurement process consistently generates help desk tickets containing high-stress keywords, or if resolving a routine approval suddenly requires a huge cluster of cross-departmental messages at 8:00 p.m. on a Friday.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the data passively flags that journey as broken. It identifies the friction hotspot, allowing the organization to intervene without requiring a single employee to complain on a survey.
That's brilliant. But once you map these journeys and find the friction, you have to figure out where to put your resources. You can't fix every single minute of the workday all at
Yeah,
once.
you have to prioritize. And this is where Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's peak end rule becomes incredibly useful.
Okay, let's break down Kahneman's peak end rule. This is so relatable.
Kahneman's research reveals a profound quirk in human psychology. When we evaluate an experience after the fact, we do not take a mathematical average of every minute we spent.
We weight certain moments heavier.
Exactly. Our memory heavily weights two specific points: the most intense moment of the experience, which is the peak, and the final moment, which is the end.
Right. So think about your last vacation. If you spend 10 days in Hawaii and months later someone asks you how the trip was, you don't calculate an average score of all 240 hours.
No, you definitely don't.
You remember the peak like the afternoon you went scuba diving and saw a pod of dolphins, and you remember the end, the grueling, delayed, turbulent flight home where the airline lost your luggage.
Exactly. You completely forget the 5 days in the middle where you just ate average hotel breakfast and read a book by the pool.
Work is the exact same way. You don't remember the 200 random Tuesday mornings you spent answering emails. You remember the day you received a massive promotion, and you remember the day a huge project failed spectacularly.
And that moment of failure is an excellent example of a peak moment. The way a manager reacts the first time an employee makes a significant mistake establishes the psychological safety baseline for the rest of that employee's tenure.
So if the manager yells at them,
Right. If the manager reacts with punitive anger, that peak moment solidifies a culture of fear that will dictate the employee's behavior for years. Organizations have to map and curate these high-stakes moments.
they can't just leave them up to chance.
Exactly. And Intuit provides a brilliant case study in applying this logic to the hiring journey, specifically for, highly competitive software engineering talent.
What did Intuit do?
Well, they mapped the candidate journey and isolated a massive friction point, the temporal gap between the final interview and the actual delivery of the offer.
Oh, that waiting period is the worst.
It is. For the hiring manager, a 2-week delay is just routine administrative processing. But for the candidate, that 2-week gap is an agonizing black hole of uncertainty.
And that anxiety probably drives them to just accept competing offers, right?
Right.
Just to relieve the stress of waiting.
Exactly. And the genius of Intuit's intervention is that they didn't attempt to win the talent war by simply jacking up the salary offers. They fundamentally redesigned the experience of waiting.
How so?
They implemented transparent timelines, provided constant interim communication, and gave candidates real-time visibility into the exact status of their application.
So they just communicated better.
Yeah, and by removing the anxiety of the unknown and curating that specific peak moment, Intuit reduced their offer decline rate by 23%.
Wow. Just by being transparent. And MasterCard did something similar with their onboarding, right?
Yes, MasterCard recognized that the first 90 days of employment are basically a prolonged peak moment.
Because traditionally, onboarding is just an administrative gauntlet.
Totally. Here's your laptop, sign these tax forms, watch this boring compliance video, now get to work.
Right.
But MasterCard shifted this from a transaction to a highly curated journey. They integrated personalized welcome content, structured conversation guides for managers, and they built in these things called relationship accelerators.
Relationship accelerators. What are those?
It's a way to actively connect new hires with mentors and key stakeholders right away. Because the hardest part of joining a massive enterprise isn't learning the software, it's understanding the invisible social network of who actually gets things done.
Oh, 100%. It's knowing who to ask when the printer breaks or when a project stalls.
Exactly. And by engineering those connections early, MasterCard radically reduced the isolation of the new hire. The result was a reduction in timed productivity by 6 weeks.
Meaning they were generating value a month and a half faster.
Yes. And it boosted their 12-month retention rate by 15 points.
That's incredible. But, a journey map that works perfectly for a 22-year-old single software engineer might be an absolute nightmare for a 40-year-old manager with 3 kids.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, what is a delightful peak moment for one person might just be an annoying distraction for someone else. So if you can't rely on a single universal journey map, how does a massive company actually scale this?
Well, this brings us to segmentation. You scale it through the development of personas. You have to completely abandon the illusion of the homogeneous workforce.
Personas, like in marketing.
Exactly like in marketing.
Mhm.
Highly detailed, research-backed representations of distinct user segments. For example, Unilever, which has over 150,000 employees globally, recognized that their legacy one-size-fits-all HR strategy was failing.
Because it was aiming for a statistical average that doesn't actually exist.
Precisely. And when Unilever built their personas, the divergence in needs was stark. They discovered that their young, early career employees in emerging markets were highly focused on aggressive skills development and international exposure.
They wanted to climb the ladder fast.
Right. But their experienced, veteran professionals in developed markets prioritized entirely different factors. They wanted deep work-life flexibility, autonomy over their schedules, and specific health and wellness benefits.
So if you give everyone the exact same benefits package, you're pleasing no one.
Exactly. By acknowledging these distinct personas, Unilever could target their investments. Instead of rolling out a global leadership program that half the company didn't want, they tailored the learning pathways and benefits to match the specific needs of each segment.
Which improves engagement and probably saves a ton of money.
Yes. It optimized operational efficiency by eliminating waste on broad brush initiatives.
And the necessity of these personas becomes undeniable when you look at caregiving responsibilities. I mean, the Harvard Business School research from 2019 showed that 73% of U.S. employees have some form of caregiving responsibility.
73%. Let that sink in.
It's massive. That encompasses parents of newborns, people with school-age kids, those caring for aging parents, or family members with disabilities. Nearly 3/4 of the workforce. And yet, corporate policies are usually designed around this myth of the ideal worker.
Yeah, that ideal worker construct is a total relic of the mid-20th century. It assumes an employee with 0 outside responsibilities, infinite schedule flexibility, and a partner at home handling all the domestic labor.
Which is just not reality for almost anyone anymore.
No, it's not. And when you design career progression models and daily workflows around that outdated assumption, You create a system that inherently penalizes the 73% of your workforce who cannot meet that standard. You force caregivers into an impossible zero-sum choice between their family and their financial security.
And because of, deeply entrenched societal norms, this friction disproportionately impacts women who statistically still shoulder the majority of caregiving duties.
Absolutely. If an organization does not explicitly design personas and workflows that accommodate caregiving, they are actively pushing vital talent out of their pool. Flexibility cannot be an exception granted by a nice manager. It has to be a systemic default.
Right, it has to be built in. And speaking of being built in, the evolution of personas leads us directly into the role of artificial intelligence.
Yes, this is where it gets very futuristic.
Because static personas are a big improvement, sure, but AI allows for dynamic hyper-personalization in real time, right?
Exactly. Instead of just placing an employee in a static working parent bucket, an AI-driven platform can adapt to their immediate context. It can dynamically match them with mentors who navigated similar transitions, or surface highly specific micro-learning content right when they take on a new project.
But wait, let me push back here. Isn't there a massive danger here with AI?
There is.
I mean, if an enterprise algorithm is constantly ingesting my behavioral data, tracking what links I click, analyzing who I message, monitoring my time on tasks, all to determine my persona, doesn't this just become a creepy surveillance tool under the guise of personalization?
This raises an important question, and the researchers are acutely aware of this risk. Work by Tambe, Capelli, and Yakubovich explicitly outlines the dangers of deploying AI in HR.
So they warn about it.
Yes. The foundational rule for AI in experience design is that the technology must serve employee agency and well-being, not just function as an extraction mechanism for productivity.
Okay, so if the AI is just tracking my mouse movements to make sure I'm not slacking off,
Then it instantly destroys psychological safety. It weaponizes the technology against the worker.
but if that same AI infrastructure is utilized to, say, proactively identify systemic overload, like if the algorithm notices that I've been logging in for 60 hours a week for a month, and it automatically tells my manager to check in on me and suggests mandatory time off.
Yes, that fundamentally enhances the experience. It shifts the AI from a surveillance mechanism to a protective mechanism. It's the difference between having a warden monitoring your cell and having a highly competent executive assistant protecting your calendar.
I love that distinction, a warden versus an assistant.
Exactly. And there's a secondary risk with AI that we have to manage. The automation of human connection. Right at the moment empathy is required most.
Oh, like dealing with a chatbot when you're having an actual crisis.
Right. If an employee is navigating a highly complex, emotionally charged situation like trying to arrange emergency medical leave for a spouse, forcing them into a doom loop with a frustrating, dead-end chatbot creates an incredibly traumatic experience.
It's so alienating.
It is. Organizations have to map their journeys to understand exactly where AI can seamlessly augment human capability and where the nuance and empathy of a human being are just absolutely irreplaceable.
So speaking of technology, the tools we use and the managers we report to are basically the two biggest architects of our daily experience. And right now, both of those are heavily flawed.
They're under immense strain, yes.
Let's talk about the digital architecture first.
Uh-huh.
There's this massive chasm between consumer tech and enterprise tech.
Oh, it's night and day. In our personal lives, we navigate ecosystems built by Apple or Google. We're used to apps that are instantly intuitive, integrated, and zero friction.
But then you log into your corporate network.
And you're transported back decades.
Literally. Think about the last time you had to log into 4 different portals with 4 different passwords just to request a single day off.
Oh, it's so common. You have to log into a legacy HR system to submit the request, a separate scheduling app to block the calendar, a project management tool to reassign your deliverables, and then an email client to notify your team.
The cognitive load required just to manage the software exceeds the cognitive load of the actual job.
This is why the research insists that organizations adopt an experience-led digital principle. Historically, IT departments bought software based on security and feature lists promised by the vendor. They rarely asked, what is the actual sequence of tasks this human being needs to accomplish today?
They didn't start with the user needs.
Exactly. But Schneider Electric provides a masterclass in solving this digital friction at scale.
Schneider Electric, they have what, like 135,000 employees?
Yes, huge global workforce. And they realized people were losing vast amounts of time navigating this labyrinth of legacy systems. But instead of attempting the impossible task of ripping out and replacing every single piece of software,
Which would take a decade.
right, they built a unified, single-layer digital experience over the top of the existing infrastructure. They used APIs and single sign-on to create one clean dashboard with intelligent search and AI support.
So the employee just deals with the clean dashboard and it talks to the ugly systems in the background.
Exactly. And this architectural overlay saved an average of 35 minutes per employee per week.
Wow. 35 minutes a week times 135,000 people. That is millions of hours of human potential reclaimed.
Millions of hours previously burned on digital frustration.
Okay, so you fix the tech, but digital friction doesn't just hurt the frontline worker, it burns out the manager. Which brings us to the second pillar, the managerial squeeze.
Yes. Research by Harder and colleagues demonstrates that the manager is the single most important variable in the employee experience. A great manager can shield a team from a toxic culture, but a terrible manager can ruin the experience at a great company.
But the research is also really empathetic to managers, right? Because they are in a punishing position.
The managerial squeeze. We expect managers to be empathetic coaches, strategic visionaries, and rigid operational taskmasters all at the same time.
It's like expecting an air traffic controller to also serve peanuts in the cabin.
That is hilariously accurate. And as organizations flatten, they continuously pile new administrative responsibilities onto managers without ever sunsetting the old tasks.
So they're buried in budget approvals and compliance audits, and we're telling them to also be these deep, empathetic mentors.
Right. And a panicked, burned out manager cannot create a safe environment. There's stress cascades down the organizational chart.
So how did Cisco fix this? They did a whole redesign.
Right. Cisco realized that sending exhausted managers to a 2-day seminar on active listening was a futile bandage. They needed structural change. So they deployed AI-powered administrative assistants specifically designed to absorb the routine, low-value friction.
Like calendar Tetris and basic approvals.
Yes. And by automating that minutia, Cisco managers reported spending 40% more time engaging in actual high-value coaching and team development.
They freed the humans to actually do the human work.
Precisely. Start with user needs, not system capabilities.
But fixing the tech and clearing the manager's schedule isn't enough if the foundational systems are inherently biased. Like if you take a biased system and make it run faster with a sleek digital overlay, you're just accelerating the inequity.
That is a critical point. We have to look at experience design strictly through the lens of equity and inclusion. Standard, neutral policies actually perpetuate inequity all the time.
Right. And the research by Carell and Simard on performance evaluations really illustrates this. We think of performance reviews as objective measurements of merit.
But the sociological data proves they are highly subjective. Carell and Simard found that women consistently receive feedback that is significantly vaguer than the feedback provided to men.
And vague feedback doesn't help you get promoted.
Exactly. It deprives the individual of the specific, actionable guidance required to navigate the corporate ladder. Disabled employees are also frequently evaluated against entirely different moving criteria.
So what does this all mean? How do organizations stop retrofitting diversity and actually build it in from day one?
It requires inclusive design as a core architecture, not a peripheral HR initiative. Accenture's redesign of their parental leave policy is a profound case study here.
Oh, this is the one about the fathers taking leave.
Yes. Accenture offered a generous parental leave policy that was, on paper, entirely equal, available to any new parent, regardless of gender, but the behavioral data showed it was almost exclusively being used by mothers.
Because the unwritten cultural norms basically said if a man takes 3 months off, he's not committed to the firm.
Exactly. Having technical permission from HR is very different from feeling culturally secure enough to actually use it.
So how did they fix the culture?
They implemented targeted manager training to actively dismantle unconscious bias. But more importantly, they built internal peer communities for fathers who were taking substantial leave.
Providing social proof.
Yes, they engineered the culture to make it socially expected for non-birthing parents to step away. And the outcome was a 300% increase in fathers taking parental leave.
That is a masterclass in inclusive design.
Yeah.
You don't just offer the policy, you design the usage of the policy to be socially acceptable.
And by normalizing leave for fathers, they leveled the caregiving playing field, which significantly improved the retention and return to work experience for mothers, too.
It's all connected. But this level of cultural engineering relies entirely on psychological safety, right? Amy Edmondson's work.
Yes, psychological safety is the shared belief that you can speak up, admit mistakes, or propose wild ideas without facing humiliation. It's the bedrock of belonging. Without it, your journey maps and AI personas are totally useless.
A great onboarding app means nothing in a toxic culture.
Exactly. The research draws a sharp line between tactical improvements and cultural foundations. Patagonia is the ultimate example of this.
Because their culture is rooted in genuine purpose.
Yes. Steger and colleagues confirmed that when employees perceive their work as meaningful, their well-being and performance skyrocket. Patagonia operationalizes this from day one. During onboarding, new hires actively participate in environmental activism projects.
They don't just read the mission statement, they actually go out and do it.
Right. And when the cultural foundation is that coherent, the tactical policies, like their extreme schedule flexibility to go surfing when the waves are good, they make logical sense. They're structural reinforcements, not just random HR perks.
Okay, all this sounds incredible. But how does an organization actually build and maintain this without it being just another passing HR fad? I mean, structurally, how do they do it?
Well, a 2022 Deloitte survey exposed a severe capability gap. 87% of organizations are doing those legacy engagement surveys, but only 34% have dedicated experience design teams.
And only 18% actually map journeys.
Right, so the intent is there, but the architectural capability is completely missing. To build it, you have to restructure power dynamics. Microsoft did this by completely overhauling HR. They placed employee experience directly under the chief people officer.
Oh, they made a dedicated specialized team.
Yes, staffed with behavioral scientists, UX researchers, service designers, and they mandated experience quality standards for all HR initiatives.
So they treat the employee experience with the exact same rigor that a tech company treats its flagship product.
Precisely. And IBM addressed this by creating an experience design academy to build T-shaped capabilities.
T-shaped capability.
It means building broad, horizontal literacy across the whole HR population like basic journey analysis, coupled with deep vertical expertise in a specialized subset like behavioral economics or predictive data analytics.
So HR is borrowing heavily from marketing and IT.
Absolutely. And Marriott shows us how to maintain this with a continuous improvement methodology. They don't wait for an annual survey. They do quarterly reviews, and they A/B test new frameworks with a small cohort before deploying them globally.
Which brings up a huge risk here for the listener, survey fatigue.
Oh, yes. The worst reaction to this is replacing the annual survey with a pop-up microsurvey after every single task.
Nobody wants a pop-up survey asking, how many stars would you rate this calendar invite after every email?
Exactly. Aggressive measurement degrades the very experience it's trying to evaluate. The structural shift has to be toward passive, behavioral, and predictive metrics.
Like tracking internal mobility rates or monitoring the resolution time of IT tickets.
Right. Or using that aggregate sentiment analysis to detect early warning signs of team burnout before people actually quit. You have to generate operational insight passively.
So we've really moved from an annual survey to treating the workplace as a continuously evolving product.
Yes. As artificial intelligence accelerates the commoditization of products and services, the technology available to competing firms will reach parity. When the tech is equal, the only sustainable competitive advantage remaining is the structural quality of the daily human experience.
That is powerful. Well, I want to thank you, the listener, for coming on this extensive deep dive with us today. To quickly recap the ground we've covered, we unpacked the billion-dollar failure of engagement surveys, the hidden tax of workplace friction, and how companies like MasterCard, Cisco, and Patagonia are entirely rewriting the architecture of the modern workday.
And if we extrapolate these findings into a final provocative thought for the future, if organizations are now forced to compete on the quality of the daily human experience, just like they compete for customers, it fundamentally shifts the power dynamic.
How so?
It means that you, the worker, are no longer just the labor. You are the ultimate consumer market, and that changes not just how companies act, but what you should unequivocally demand the next time you accept a job.
You are the consumer of the workplace experience. So think about your own workplace journey this week. Where is the friction draining your energy? What are the peak moments? And most importantly, is your organization designing for the whole you Or are they just waiting for the smoke detector to go off? Keep asking those questions, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.